ask our next set of panelists to come up. They are going to be doing an informal dialogue about the extraordinary challenges that floods and fires give us. And Ken K. Meyer is going to be the facilitator, and he will ask each of these other panelists to introduce themselves. While they come up, I want to point out that all of these presentations will be on our website. It's the website that we put the address up earlier, and we'll put it up again before the day is over. But you can go on that website, and in addition to what I told you earlier that we have there, you will have opportunity to see all of these presentations. And I'd also like to mention that the Google Earth map that you've been seeing is only one part of what is going on in the Poudre area. We have a group of folks at CSU and in the community that are really doing some good work mapping the Poudre and making that available for all of us. So if you go on our website and click on the Poudre Wiki, you'll get access to lots of maps there. So now I'm going to turn it over to you, Ken, and you guys have at it.
Thanks, Mary Lou. My name is Ken Kmar. I'm the Senior Aquatic Biologist for Colorado Parks and Wildlife for the South Platte River Basin. Prior to this job, I was the Fishery Biologist for the Poudre from 1987 to 2007. And I think all of you have heard that we had a flood and a fire. If you didn't, you probably have been living in a hole someplace. And what we'd like to do with this group up here today is kind of take a different perspective of, we're all pretty aware of what the physical damage that everybody has seen to some extent of the flood and the fire, but we're going to delve into some of the other things from some different perspectives. And so up here with me today is Eric Rickentine, who is with the City of Greeley Water and Sewer and also with the Coalition of Poudre River, Todd Bolt from the Natural Resources Conservation Service, Nolan Duskin from Colorado Climate Center, and George Wallace, who is an ag producer and a ex-professor from CSU and is currently with North Poudre Irrigation. So I'd like to give these guys a couple minutes apiece, kind of introduce themselves, and then I got some questions for you.
Hello, my name is Eric Reckentine, Deputy Director, Water Resources for the City of Greeley, and also a founder of the Coalition for the Poudre River Watershed. For people that have not heard yet, the Coalition for the Poudre River Watershed, or CPRW, is a new nonprofit. Its mission is to improve the ecological health of the Poudre River and the Poudre watershed. Primary focus is a 3 to 5 year plan focused on soil mitigation in the High Park Fire and Hewlett Gulch burn areas, but also want to focus on long-term future planning for forest health in the Poudre River watershed and perhaps in other watersheds as well.
George Wallace, and I'm going to try and just give you a sense of how the watershed condition affected irrigators and irrigation companies this past season. I'm involved in a couple of groups working on water issues, including a basin-wide working group, a number of you here on that group, looking at ways that agriculture can share water with water utilities.
And my name is Nolan Duskin. I'm the state climatologist for Colorado, situated in the Atmospheric Science Department, which is in the College of Engineering at CSU. And my job responsibility statewide and locally is monitoring the climate of the state. And that really means keeping the pulse of day-to-day weather conditions as they add up to our big picture climate and how things vary when they do vary profoundly and dramatically. And obviously flood and fire both fit in that range of climate variability that we deal with. So I'm here to address the climate side of the question.
I'm Todd Bolt. I'm the district conservationist with USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service out of the Fort Collins field office. NRCS works with private lands to address conservation issues out there through technical and financial assistance. We get involved with different emergency watershed protection projects, programs, when something like a fire or flood occurs. So strictly working with some private land issues. And we have some new math over at the federal government out of our office. It's called 4Fs equals R. And we have fire, flood, furlough, and the new farm bill equals 1R, which is retirement.
So we'll get to the first question. First question for the four of you is, what can you tell us from your personal and professional experience about the changes posed for the Poudre from the recent fire and flood? What challenges has that put up for you as an individual, both personally and professionally?
The fire issue really, from a personal standpoint, it was some aspects of it were very satisfying. Just working with new entities like City of Greeley, City of Fort Collins, and Larimer County, trying to coordinate a response on the private lands to address the issues that occurred because of the fire that affect the river. From a professional standpoint, it was also very rewarding because we developed, I thought, some great relationships with those entities to come up with solutions to address the issues.
Many of those are quite obvious, but from my point of view as a climatologist, one of the things that we know, as well monitored as the stream flow of the main stem of the Poudre River has been, one of the longest monitored rivers in the state, there's surprisingly little long-term historic climate information upstream from the canyon mouth. And while we maintain a weather station on the CSU campus with well over 125 years of data, other than a couple of snow courses that have been read for quite a long time, and then where are we? We're at 34 years with the Snowtail program, something like that, which is really a pretty small snippet of history when you think about it, and surprisingly few historic rain gauges up in the basin. And this is one of the largest basins of the whole Front Range area. So to me, monitoring is still a challenge. We had, fortunately, thanks to the BLM Forest Service Remote Automated Weather Station network, which had a couple of gauges, a couple of sensors up in the foothills, we could see in 2012, in late May into early June, that we had unprecedentedly dry fuel moisture conditions. And it was simply a question of, would there be ignition? If there was an ignition source, there was a fuel source that was as vulnerable as it had probably ever been, at least in many decades. And we were grateful to have some data giving us that pre-warning, but it didn't stop the event from happening. I think that's plenty for me to say right now.
Most farmers had personal challenges related to delays in irrigation scheduling because of blockages on the river and so forth this year. We had a lot of ash and sediment in our structures. We had damage to irrigation structures. We had to constantly clean out pivot sprinklers, and we worried about what that sediment was doing to irrigation equipment like pumps and so forth. The challenges to the companies, we irrigate on our farm from two different companies, and the challenges that they had was to be able to quickly respond to those blockages and clear them out. And now they're going to be faced with the challenges of rebuilding diversion structures and coordinating. I think more than anything else, the challenges that we have to coordinate among different water entities when you have a watershed impacts like this. Later, I'll talk in a little bit more detail if I get a chance about the fact that irrigated ag took a lot of the flood surge. We helped soften the impact. And it's going to require a lot of talking to one another when we have these types of crisis events in a watershed, to be able to move water where it needs to be moved and help each other out. And then I think lastly, thinking about the watershed itself, I think residents, we have a lot of residents in our middle and lower watershed in forested areas. The challenge there is to help everyone else do a better job of watershed management, reducing erosion, taking care of vegetation and weeds, and access, and a lot of things that were problematic during this last spate of fires and flooding. So there's challenges all the way up. Thank you.
I'm gonna jump out of my CPRW role and talk about a mini water provider on this one. The concern, of course, is water quality for the citizens in northern Colorado. During the fire events, and really last year as well, a question was asked about water quality in relation to the breweries, and really the answer was water quality was okay for the breweries because the municipalities that are providing the water turn their diversions off and rely on the CBT system in order to bring the fresh water to those industries and to the citizens. And the concern is, again, in 2012, I think the diversions were shut off over 100 days. Last year, 80 days. And it's a big strain on everybody's system. Luckily, there's redundancies. Luckily, we have the CBT system to help supplement the supplies. But the concern, of course, is if these fires continue to happen, if there's issues and fires in other counties that affect the Trans Mountain water, it's a large concern for the redundancies and the ability to provide water to the citizens.
Thanks. Next question. What are you or your organization doing to potentially better prepare us for the next time? Is there things you're doing to prepare us for the next natural disaster that happens, whether it be flood, fire, famine, whatever comes about?
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about my role in the coalition. So the coalition for the Poudre River watershed, which is Fort Collins, Greeley, Larimer County, and about 10 other nonprofit stakeholders and entities, recently just hired an executive director. Her name is Jen Kaveskis. Jen, if you raise your hand up. She's the ED now for the coalition. The coalition is also in the process of acquiring grant money. We have one grant secured from the CWCB for restoration work this year in the High Park fire area, and we're also going for a grant, and I believe we have that pretty much secured from the CDPHE Water Quality Control Division for more restoration work. In conjunction with that, the cities of Greeley and Fort Collins, again, are in partnership to continue mitigation work up in the High Park fire area. We have another $2 million under our Phase 3 mulching effort that will start again here in June. So there's quite a bit happening again to continue the restoration work up in the High Park fire area, and then most importantly, begin planning for future pre-fire mitigation efforts, both in this basin and in other basins that may affect the water quality and supply to the citizens.
With respect to this basin-wide water sharing group, we are looking at some things that, agreements that could be made. Eric is on this group as well, between agriculture and water utilities when you get a crisis like this. This past year, City of Fort Collins had a lot of carbon loading, would prefer to take their water for treatment from Horsetooth Reservoir. And so we were able to, a number of irrigators agreed to give their CBT water, which is stored in Horsetooth, in exchange for river water. And we got a little extra river water over the amount we gave. But we were able to help each other out in that case, but we'd like to think about ways to make those sorts of sharing and sharing infrastructure and storage in a more permanent way, in a more institutionalized way over time in the future.
At the Climate Center, what these events have pointed out have been weaknesses in monitoring, in particular rainfall information in the North fork of the Poudre is very historically limited and was limited during this event, so that we really didn't know how much rain was falling in a timely fashion in the North Fork, and only to a limited degree in the middle elevation ranges of the main stem Poudre. We knew much more about the rainfall over the High Park fire just because of the High Park fire and all of the post-fire weather observing networks that had been and runoff networks that had been deployed in order to monitor the response of the burn area. So hopefully there will be some enhancements in monitoring in the Poudre watershed. This was one of the few events in the Poudre, the flood, where where heavy rains were noted all the way to the top of the watershed. Historically, the heavy rains occur in the low elevation portion, and that's where they maximized with this storm. But they did continue there was sizable rainfalls all the way to the top of Cameron Pass, unlike most storms of the past. And there's still a lot of unmonitored areas that we're only guesstimating how much rain fell from this storm. From a fire point of view, I think we learned a lot from we learned that the information that was available to us on fuel moisture, that was of course available to the firefighting community but wasn't necessarily being monitored by other entities, should in fact be monitored by other entities when it's in extreme condition, and we're going to try to make sure that happens in the future.
After the Hewlett Gulch fire, we jumped right into the High Park fire, and from a recovery standpoint, and got a lot of work done eventually with that under the EWP program. The one thing you need to remember about the Emergency Watershed Protection Program is it does not have a pot of money sitting around waiting to be allocated. It has to be appropriated by Congress through a request through our state conservationists down in Denver, so Congress can go through their process to put money in it. One of the things that we were prepared to do this fall, after we got done with the second round of mulching, was to sit down with the sponsors of that EWP project, Larimer County, Fort Collins, and Greeley, and let's look at it from a lessons learned standpoint. Well, just when we're about ready to do that, the flood happened. So that would be one of the things from our agency's standpoint, would be to sit down with our local sponsors and local entities that we work with and say, what were the lessons learned? How could we do this better? And one of the things I noticed working on the flood, there's two components of a flood situation. One is the response that they have, and it was all initiated out of here, or coordinated or headquartered out of here, and it's very well organized, and its purpose is to respond and get people out of a dangerous situation. And once that task is met, a lot of people just pack up and go home, and then another phase comes in if they meet certain financial criteria under FEMA, and that's the recovery phase. And the one thing I've noticed is that coordination for the response is very, very good. But when it comes to the recovery phase, with all of these different entities running around, that coordination kind of drops by the wayside and everybody goes off and does their own thing. So that would be one thing, I think, from a future planning standpoint, is that we establish a recovery planning team, so to speak. Because I guarantee you, one of these things is going to happen again. I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but if we do a fairly good job of planning for it into the future, just from a standpoint of we can do a better job on the land recovery, I think that'll make things go a lot faster and a lot smoother. And to Eric's point about looking into the future, I don't know how this all happens, but you really need to sit down, whoever it is, and do some pre-planning and prioritizing of some of these watersheds. What are going to be the impacts if a fire occurs in watershed A? What is it going to impact? What is our present fuel moisture situation? How is that going to affect the irrigation companies? How is it going to affect the cities and their ability to deliver water to their constituents? So we have a lot of private land and public land intermixed in a lot of these watersheds. So it's going to take some coordination to do some prioritizing of those watersheds, but also to do some land treatment to minimize damaging fires that cause some of these problems that we have.
Quickly, I think we all are aware that everybody is dependent, all these groups are dependent on the Poudre for some different reason. Is there other groups out there that need to be pulled in to work with this, or are there other collaborative efforts that you guys see that could happen that would benefit this whole preparation for fire, flood, whatever other natural disaster could happen?
Well, I think the CPRW is a great first step. So within the CPRW, there is advisory boards within that. So we're looking to the NRCS, we're looking to the state and federal Forest Service to help guide the NRCS into the future on our future planning and priorities for flooding and mitigation for fires.
This is the next question, right?
That's the next question.
Okay, some of us hadn't seen these questions until just now. If I borrowed your list and Todd was looking at his. Okay, I think that Justice Hobbs inspired me to go back historically just a little bit. I think we will have more of these types of events just because we had years ago legislation that allowed a lot of residential development in the middle of the watershed and the lower part of the watershed. And that makes it hard to do the kinds of things that watershed managers like to do. Sarah would say perhaps we need to use fire, both prescribed burns and natural burns, to reduce fuel loading so we don't get catastrophic fire, we get lower intensity fires. So we're going to have to bring in homeowners associations, people that live up there. We have to work on defensible space, on erosion control, on weed control. There's this tremendous part of this is the recovery now. Tremendous flush of exotic species everywhere that are going to come down into all of our ditches and out onto all of our farms and so forth. So we need to bring them in. Again, we need to have a more systematic way of coordinating what happens when we get either floods or drought. Are we ready to share water between fallow some land and share water with cities? Are we ready to absorb the shock in a way that reduces damage on the main stem? Have we got these things in place prior to the events happening?
Again, from a climate and climate monitoring point of view, in the quote-unquote old days, there were 3 players. The U.S. Geological Survey tracked the rivers, the Natural Resources Conservation Service tracked the snow, and the National Weather Service tracked the precipitation and temperature conditions. And it's a different ball game now with many players involved in environmental monitoring, which requires understanding who all those players are, who are collecting data for different reasons in different ways, and bringing that information together so that it can be used both as in a post-flood way, which we've been able to do as we've mapped the storm that occurred this past September, but also use it in a way that could aid in prediction and seeing what's coming next. So there's a lot of coordination opportunities for those involved in environmental monitoring.
I brought up the point of the EWP funding to make a point. There's anything we try to do from a standpoint of recovery, like trying to mulch with on the High Park fire, or using some funding mechanism to fix some of the stuff in the Big Thompson and all the way down into Boulder County and some of these other areas affected by flood. It's obviously going to cost money. And there's not a lot of it around. And one of the things we've talked about in our office is just from the standpoint, we have a we have a tax on ourselves in Larimer County for open space dollars to put forward to purchase open space. From a state level standpoint, I believe it would be worthwhile to have some sort of contingency fund built up to respond for the recovery efforts from these events that we have. We're looking right now from an EWP funding or EWP cost on Big Thompson, Little Thompson, all the way down into Boulder County and El Paso County with Colorado Springs and all the issues they had there from the flood. Just an early estimate of $100 million. That's just from a federal standpoint coming in. That's not even talking about how much the state's going to spend or the local entities are going to spend. So, you know, you look at the challenges that we have going into the future to try to recover from these. If we don't do the pre-planning to minimize some of these events, we're going to have to be responsive and go out there and try to fix them afterwards, and we're going to need money to do that. So it's just a thought that, you know, maybe some of the leaders in the room and throughout the state and federal government start thinking about some contingency funds to have it available quickly. I think that was one of the big issues after the High Park fire is Greeley and Fort Collins and Larimer County are ready to get going under EWP. The fire was in June of 2012. We didn't get funding until June of 2013. So that's a big issue, and there's a lot of damage that occurs in between those two times. So,
Mary Lou, how are we doing on time? Okay, just quickly, I have one last question. Outside of the coalitions that are being built, everything we hear about fire and flood have a lot of negative connotations to them. Is there something positive from the fire and the flood that we can recognize outside of other than building these coalitions that we're seeing being built?
Again, if you look, and I'm not an ecologist, but if you look past the property losses to the impacts on the ecological system, floods are good for rivers and fires are good for natural lands. It's tough when we reside in those same areas. That's where the challenge comes. Yeah.
There's potentially an opportunity to rebuild in a more environmentally friendly way. So a diversion ditch loses a head gate. Perhaps we put in, instead of just rebuilding in the same manner, we put in fish bypasses while we're there. We look at running augmentation water through meters at the head gate instead of running all the way through the ditch and keeping the water in the river. There is potential for good things to happen out of this type of adversity. So it's just really getting together as groups, looking at best way to rebuild some structures, remanage how we're looking at some things. And there is an opportunity with these challenges to benefit and enhance the river.
A number of years ago, Todd helped us reestablish a wetland complex on the farm. And it was gratifying to watch that perform during the flood and slow down and absorb a lot of the shock on Dry Creek. And I would just say that events like this show the value in those kinds of NRCS and Fish and Wildlife Service programs. And also, again, the fact that we had to share water with Fort Collins will help us, I think, realize the value in working together on a variety of issues in the future.
I'm feeling a lot of love up here. Something positive from the fire and flood. I'm a kind of for a long time I've been a half full type of guy. Sometimes lately I've been a half empty type of guy, but we've developed a lot of good relationships with a lot of different entities, and to maintain that momentum to prepare for the next one, we really need to sit down and work out just the littlest things so we're more responsive. And I think these things that occur, although they're unfortunate and devastating for a lot of people, from my standpoint, it allows us to reach out to different people and lend a helping hand to them and make a eventually a positive impact on them. So, and above all of that, I really want to thank the city of Greeley because I've become a helicopter snob.
I want to say one more thing. Extreme events always result in research that practically always leads to improved prediction of the next extreme events. And we've had it only took us a year and a half to have extreme drought, extreme fire behavior, extreme flood, and it sometimes takes firsthand experience to learn. We try to learn from other people's experiences, but sometimes you learn the best from your own. We've had a lot of experience to learn from.
Very true. I figured Todd would just add furlough to that and say the best thing to come out of it might be retirement. So I want to thank the panel up here today, and hopefully it gave you some more insight into where the fire and flood impacted other sectors of our lives that we are very dependent on, and that the Poudre are dependent on the Poudre. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mary Lou.
Thank you, Ken. Before I let these guys off the stage, I want to know if everybody realizes that this Todd Bolt at the end is the person that gets in the paper 3 times a year shown measuring the snow up in the mountains. How many recognize him? Todd Bolt. Okay, Todd, that's your claim to fame. Thank you, guys. We're going to have an opportunity to ask these fellows questions and the panelists previously and this morning's presenters. But in addition to asking questions, this is a time for you guys to participate in some dialogue. What do you value on the Poudre? What kinds of things do you have ideas about how maybe we could all work together better to make the Poudre the world's best example of a working river, a hard-working river, but that is also healthy?
Thanks for all of you that hung in there. We've had a lot of talks today. I think we've learned a lot. I know I have. And really to move the dial on this river, in this watershed, in these diverse communities, we need to understand each other better, I think. We need to understand different interests, different perspectives, and we do that through dialogue, right? We do that through listening to each other, making positive contributions to the talk, to the dialogue as a group. And so what we're going to do now is we've got 30 or 40 minutes. We'll see how it goes. And questions are going to be fine. You can ask a question of any of the speakers, and we'll move the mic around to those speakers. Mary Lou and I won't answer those questions. We'll just sort them to the right person. But I think also it doesn't have to be just questions. I think statements, perspectives, maybe ideas about what you think we should be doing on the river or what we're not doing or how we could do it better. I think all of those we're now open to as kind of a community of folks here on the Poudre. And that's really the only ground rules are let's be civil in our conversation and let's listen to each other. I think that's the key to dialogue, right? Is understanding and listening. So with that, I think we're ready to go ahead and throw it open. We have 3 or 4 roving mics around.
I want to thank all the speakers. I really appreciate everything, all the information that's been presented. And I have a lot of questions, but I'm just going to ask 2. So, and this question is primarily, I think, for Boyd. But given, he showed some great data about what's happened to the common shiner and the brassy minnow on Front Range rivers, and that's, I think, kind of an indicator of, a really important indicator of what's happening to fish habitat, and but also just the aquatic systems in these rivers. And I guess the 2 questions I have are, first, is there potentially a role for the state or federal agencies to come in and regulate on this issue? What role should the state and the federal government take on this? And second of all, from an ecologist perspective, what should we be doing? What can be done to help restore these species and protect these ecosystems?
So both of those species were just two examples. They are both state listed as threatened, and if we have we will have the opportunity. The common shiner will probably be uplisted to endangered, state endangered. Now, that our state listing doesn't really have any regulatory teeth, and we like it that way. We pride ourselves on working with people, forming partnerships to try to do good things for fish and wildlife. We're not an agency that will ever tell you how to manage your land, how to manage your water. That's not what we do. It's different than if a species becomes listed as endangered. And one example, Brian was reminding me because he's on our wetlands committee, but we worked on a wetlands project with the city of Fort Collins to establish refugia population for common shiner and brassy minnow in a reclaimed gravel pit that we're going to be modifying to make it more favorable for those species. As far as will this species ever be listed, I think was the second part of the question. That's our goal as a state. We take great pride in protecting our fish and wildlife resources, and we take it as a loss when a species becomes federally listed. And that's why we prefer to work with people, not against them.
I'd like to add that we are in the process of writing a basin management plan or conservation plan for all the species that we have in the South Platte Basin, and common shiner will be one of those. And in that plan, we will be developing threats and potential impacts that could happen, and then an approach, hopefully that approach we'll have to be doing habitat restoration and things like that to protect those species, if not enhance those species as we move forward. Boyd's worked really hard on that, and it should be coming out from our agency here within the next 6 to 9 months, I would imagine. So hopefully that'll be good.
And Ken, will there be implementation behind that plan, or what happens next?
We'll utilize the plan to develop yearly working plans. So it will really guide what we do as an agency in the field in development of habitat or use of stocking or use of habitat protections or conservation easements and things like that. So yeah, there'll be the big management plan will drive yearly work plans.
So Mark, you asked the question and you heard the answer from the state guys. Do you want to respond to that?
No, I'd just say thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Okay, good.
Okay, I'm going to field the next one, and I want to have a quick follow-up to that, and then I think Brad has someone who has something. Jeffrey Boring with Larimer County is working with one of our subcommittees on the Poudre Runs Through It, and they're doing some very cool things, working with ditch companies to see how they can do some things that will be beneficial to the river. And I'd like Jeffrey to tell about that because I think it ties into what Mark was asking about. So Jeffrey, would you do that?
Sure, I can say just a couple words about that. Right after the September floods, we kind of did a basin-wide look at what the status of the diversion structures were, and I worked with Wade Willis at Windsor and Eric Reckentine with Greeley, and there were 2 diversion structures in Weld County in the Frank State Wildlife Area that we looked at closely, and one of them was impacted by the flood. And so we reached out to them to see if they were interested in maybe modifying the structure in the future. It's an old structure. It's been there for decades, and it needed to be repaired. And so we thought about repairing it in a way that would be multi-beneficial. So retain the capacity to divert and deliver water the same way it has for year after year after year, but it could also meet some of these resource objectives we've been talking about today, particularly fish movement. And so fortunately we've got a little bit of traction. We're just starting the discussion, and there may be a representative from one of those ditch companies here today. So we're just starting the dialogue. There's a lot of state money available for these kinds of improvements. But this is new territory for us, so we're trying to understand the rules and regulations, who our partners could be. Parks and Wildlife is a big partner for something like this. and see if there's a way to cooperate and build a better structure that can serve the river as well as serve all the shareholders of a ditch company.
Speaking of ditch companies and species, I know that in our quest for balance between the different uses of water, it's sometimes tempting to think that all the diversions off the river are ecologically impacting. And I just want people to remember that all of the ditches, the laterals, the reservoirs are also providing certain amount of riparian habitat and different types of like gallery forests and associated wetlands. A lot of farms, including our own, have wildlife habitat that we've constructed. Others have tailwater ponds. So basically, the river is feeding a very large landscape and creating some of the very ecological values that you hope to preserve in the river. We want those in the river, but we want you to recognize that they are also created on an irrigated landscape. Thank you.
I'm Ashley Fickey. I'm with GEI Consultants, and I'd like to agree with this gentleman here. I've studied fish passage now for close to 10 years, and a couple of things that have come out of that is in urban systems, there are some often compelling reasons to not have fish passage. So what we need to do is when we talk about things like this, we have to have very special or very site-specific considerations when we look at things like stream restoration and fish passage. And the other thing that I'd like to say is that there may be some opportunity to use habitats like agricultural ditches to enhance certain types of fisheries depending on the ecology of the native species out here on the plains. Thank you.
Great comment. Steve, go ahead.
With the increased popularity of locally grown food and the Colorado Proud program, is there, and excuse me if you're already doing this, but like farmers markets and things like that, could that present a place, a forum for maybe just informal dialogue between agricultural producers and consumers or folks and non-ag folks? It seems to me it would be a logical place, as I said, to present an informal place to just talk about our differences and our similarities.
Boy, I like that idea. I belong to Jodar Farms, which is a CSA for chicken and eggs, and they do a film series in the summer. We could easily add dialogue about ag-urban cooperation through that. Good idea.
Yes, I run the Greeley Farmers Market in addition to lots of other things I do. Karen Scopel, City of Greeley. I would welcome anybody here if you want to have a booth at my market on a one-time or an ongoing basis. Get in touch with me, and it's a great place to share a story.
Excellent. Thank you.
So, Bill, I think you had a good idea there. It's just who's going to take it forward, right? Yes, Steve, go ahead.
This one's mostly geared toward Nolan. And anybody else that wants to ask or add to it. With the ubiquity of satellite data, would you talk about the pros and cons of using that as infill for your monitoring basin-wide basis and things like that?
Satellite has great potential for enhancing spatial detail on snowpack and snow water equivalent. And probably more on forest conditions than I know. I'm not an expert on that area. In terms of using it for precipitation as it falls, satellite is not delivering the goods yet. So there's improvements that we could make, but it's not going to answer everything.
John Monson, Water and Sewer Director for Greeley. I'll try to throw out a real tough one here just to get the ball rolling. We demonstrated, or the science is showing that in certain parts of the watershed, agriculture and urban runoff are contributing 5 to 10 times the nutrient load that wastewater plants are. And yet agriculture is pretty much unregulated with regard to nutrients. And the question for the agricultural community is, would you be interested in putting yourself under regulation if the cities came up with the money to help reduce the nutrient load?
I think that what John's suggestion is a good one. I think that we need to continue the dialogue. I think we need to probably flush some of those particular issues out a little bit more within with the working group, for example. I'm going to kind of go off the subject. I was going to ask a question myself. One of the things that I've run into as a new manager at North Poudre is that we lost our Fossil Creek Inlet diversion structure, and that's a dry up point on the Poudre River, and we would have certainly liked to have designed a fish passage into that structure, but in dealing with FEMA, in dealing with permitting within the floodplain, City of Fort Collins, things like that, we're only allowed to reconstruct what we had there before. So I think it's an issue that ag folks have the ability to, when we have such a disaster, to redesign those structures so we can add on these things that will help the ecology of the river, help the fish, if that's what if it's functional within our system and we're able to do it. But right now we don't have the ability to do that under certain rules and conditions, and when we go after certain types of grants and loan money.
Yeah, Scott, that's a really great point. And the Poudre Basin wasn't hit nearly as hard as Boulder, Vrain, and some of the others, as you know. And the problem these guys are facing is they've got to rebuild right away, right? They've got to get their construction folks out and get back into the river. You almost need the plan on the books before the disaster occurs, right? And if we've learned anything from this flood, maybe that's something that we can take away as the irrigation community. I know that DARCA, the Ditch and Reservoir Company Alliance, is having a lot of discussions, and to me, I'm hoping this is something we'll integrate, because those opportunities or crises or extreme events, they come around, and then what do you do, right? You've got to have the plan. So it's a wonderful point. I thought we ought to go back to John's point about ag and nutrients, and the ag guys were really shy when he asked that. I thought it was a great question. Okay, how many ag producers are in the room? Raise your hand if you're an ag producer. Okay, I'm seeing a couple. All right, guys. So, we're still, John, working on a 1987 Clean Water Act, right? We haven't reauthorized the Clean Water Act in a really long time, and that act, the ag part was voluntary, and we're still there. And has the mood changed? I think that's what you said. So you guys who raised your hand as producers, are you willing to be regulated on nutrients? Are you willing to do trading? What do you say? Let's have a response. Who's brave? All right, we got one over here.
Certainly room for conversation there. Regulation is one thing. Voluntary participation may be something that would be more readily accepted, or I don't know. This is new. I mean, I don't know how to really answer the question. I mean, there's certainly hard to measure the nutrient. Our water's coming in off the river. What are we picking up there? What's coming in from? We take stormwater in from residential areas. They put fertilizer on their lawns. It rains. You get it from all kinds. How are you going to regulate that, and how are you going to measure it, I guess is what I'm saying. And so I certainly room for conversation there.
Yeah, I think,
I don't know.
Dale, I mean, your point is good. That's why it wasn't regulated in the 87 Act, was that they didn't figure they could pull it off, right? And let's try a voluntary approach.
There may be some room there to talk. So,
thank you very, very much. I can always tell when I've been challenged, because it feels like my brains are going to go out of my ears, and I've got writer's cramp from taking notes. I probably learned more than I did in 4 years of college, but a secondary English teaching degree from the University of Northern Colorado kind of mitigates that a little bit. I have a good friend, probably the most brilliant man I've ever known and the best teacher. His name is, what is his name? Well, what's his name? Jay McGrew. He actually grew up the Poudre Canyon, and he had the invention that takes seawater that's had oil in it and cleans it. And he has recently perfected his patent on a thing called a vertical tube reactor. that takes treated wastewater minimum of a mile deep, combination of heat, pressure, and oxygen. When the water comes up, it's about the quality of distilled water. The heavy metals go out into a felt like cloth. But my question related to all that is, in some of the presentations, particularly this afternoon, can water be cleaned or treated too much that when it goes back into the rivers and stuff, it's too sterile to support life?
Good question. How about one of our ecologists respond to that? Or our wastewater treatment folks?
The type of treatment that we have at a wastewater plant is, especially the larger ones, we're talking about anywhere from 7 to 30 million gallons a day. And when we're trying to remove nutrients, we're looking at biological processes for the most part, because that's the most efficient, and really the best way to do it, the cheapest way. As far as getting water too clean for the environment, I can say, I guess, that I can see really ultra clean water absorbing other ions because it wants to grab onto stuff, but I can't see it being a problem from being too clean.
I want to make a challenge here before we go on to the next comment, and that is John Monson is saying, what if urban utilities came up with the money to do something about nutrients from agriculture? And so I would like to challenge Dale and Scott and John to get together and put together the kind of group that Scott Hummer mentioned, that maybe this needs to start from a grassroots kind of group, getting together and talking about the issue, and maybe could be a prototype for what could be happening other places in the country.
Mary Lou, I'd just note that CSU has a new nutrient center that's just kicking up with EPA funding, and they're actually very interested in this idea of trading, and we've got some economists that want to work on it. So if you want to be the guinea pigs, we've got the people to help do the discussion.
And just one other aspect of this nutrient trading, the Nature Conservancy is putting together a Colorado Conservation Exchange Program, which is going to try to answer some of the things that Dale was pointing out. Is it's very difficult to measure and to quantify and to exchange these things, but we are trying to make strides in that area. So yes, I would love to have that conversation, because we kind of misquoted our numbers earlier today with the amount. By 2017, Greeley is talking $6 to $7 million at our wastewater plant. Boulder in another basin is 13 or 14. Fort Collins with 2 plants is talking $40 or $50 million for treatment of nutrients. There's a lot of money available to do something else. So let's talk about it. Excellent.
I'm just going to add to the nutrient and how clean the water needs to be. I think some of those nutrients are the basis of most food chains, like in the lake systems. You have to have some nutrients in there in order for the production of zooplankton and phytoplankton to happen. So we as an agency, sitting down with the health department, is saying we do not really look for distilled water in our reservoirs. We'd rather see some nutrients in there so we maintain a food chain source that starts it off. And I think the same thing could be said in the rivers, as those aquatic invertebrates in the bottom of the river are utilizing some of those nutrients for growth and survival, as well as some of the riparian vegetation, as long as it gets access to that water.
Good, thanks, Ken. So it doesn't have to be pristine. There's some value in those nutrients. Another comment.
Hey, I'd like to address a little bit of Mr. Munson's question about nutrient loading. I think as in the state of Colorado, the idea of return flows and ag water efficiency has kind of a little bit put the idea of nutrient loading on its head, in the fact that a lot of water passes by fields in the effort of return flows that junior water rights holders hold strong and fast to. But if that water never passed out of the field, that nutrient loading doesn't move. I think you see it heavily on the western slope with the salinity numbers where water leaves the river, goes through a bunch of adobe hills and comes back to the river with a lot of salt in it. If that water never left the river to begin with, it would never move any salt. So I think there's a two-faceted approach there. It's very complicated because return flows are very, very complicated and hostile environment to talk in, but it is a two-staged approach to reducing nutrient loading, because most of that nutrient loading is because of inefficiencies.
Thanks, Zach, for bringing that up. Zach is working on a project we're working on over on the West Slope, where we are working with a group of farmers who are trying to figure out if they could divert closer to their crop need rather than take more from the river at the beginning than they need without affecting the rights of downstream users. And so this is a big question, and one that ag producers are beginning to try to look at.
Okay, I'm Marcella Hutchinson with the United States Environmental Protection Agency Region 8 office, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and all the dialogue I've heard today. I had not heard something from a relatively new program from the United States Department of Agriculture, NRCS office, called the National Water Quality Initiative. I think might help with some of the nutrients issues here. The Cache La Poudre Fort Collins has been designated as one of their priority watersheds for this year. That provides a set aside of EQIP dollars for agricultural producers to put on the land agricultural best management practices. The target here is sediment, but those would help address nutrients like phosphorus as well. So that opportunity should be coming up shortly, so please watch for it. Thank you.
Okay, Dick Tinsley, Soil and Crop Science Department. Regarding your situation out there in the Grand Junction area, have you ever looked at the Walton Mohawk project down in Yuma? They had that very same problem, and the soil conservation, I go back to the Natural Resources Conservation Program went in there and made some major improvements. Their concern was providing quality water to Mexico, and they did get that done, so that desalination project, as far as I know, has never been utilized. I also think that on this nutrient management thing, yes, it is a problem of inefficiency. The reverting to the center pivots and things like that, I think, has done a lot to reduce that. And can I add another question that's been kind of bugging me? You had this major flood here last September, which I assume you diverted as much as you could into your reservoirs. Is there going to be capacity to handle the spring runoff, or is that going to be another problem?
So, Dick, what I can tell you is when that flood came, people were having to shut down their head gates and inlet channels, right? It was too much velocity, too much trash, too many logs. South Platte reservoir situation is quite good. And, you know, if we get a good snowpack, all the better. That means there'll be a lot of water moving down the channel, I guess. We probably wouldn't be able to hold it all, but we're in a fortunate situation.
During the storm, a lot of the structures were overtopping on the Poudre and taking water whether you wanted to or not. And the reservoirs are filled. Typically, the reservoirs are full by the time the spring runoff hits. I mean, yeah, there's some of them that are being topped off, but typically those reservoirs decrees are called out by that time. And so I wouldn't expect, I mean, obviously, if it keeps snowing like this and it looks like Wisconsin, and, you know, there may be a lot of snow that it turns into water that we can't handle, but on a typical storm, or a typical spring, I don't see much of an issue other than what would normally happen. So that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Dale.
I'm Tracy Cattell. I'm a Colorado Parks and Wildlife engineer. I just want to address real quick the comment about the diversion of the fish passages. That they're exactly right. Those things take additional money. And the one thing that, you know, we're kind of encouraging people to do is to look at your diversion structure, and every situation is different. But if you can plan for it in the future, about like leaving a block out area, so you can just knock it out easily to put a future one in there, that's the kind of thing that we're asking at this point, because it may happen 10, 20 years down the road, we don't know. But every situation is different, that if you can kind of just get a good idea for planning in the future, that would help a lot.
John, I'd like to hear from you for just a second. You're involved in something that I think is important to this basin, and we really haven't talked about it today. Would you fill us in?
Sure. Thank you, Reagan. First of all, my compliments to the Poudre runs through. I've had the good fortune to be part of this process or observe portions of it the last 3 years. And it's a good example of collaboration and cooperation when people that may have differed and may still differ on issues can sit down at the same room and talk about what's important. And we've started identifying each other as being fellow humans, and that we're able to figure out some solutions through this approach. Project that many of you know that I'm working on as special advisor to the governor on water is the Colorado Water Plan. And we're looking to each of the basins, and I see several Basin Roundtable members in the audience today. But we're using the information from the collaborative, cooperative approach of the basins, and you're an important part as a part of the Poudre in the South Platte Basin to develop the components, the building blocks of the Colorado Water Plan. And so I encourage you to, through your example that you've been portraying and exhibiting here today, add that to the South Platte Basin Implementation Plan, and that'll become an important part of the Colorado Water Plan. We're looking for a draft to share with the governor at the end of this year, and then have another year throughout 2015 to have a robust public discussion about it. If you'd like, you can go onto a website that's called coloradowaterplan.com and see what we've been up to, and feel free to contact me or other people at the Water Conservation Board about it. Thank you for that shameless plug.
Yeah, so John, hang on there for a second. If somebody in the Poudre Basin wanted to get a substantive comment into South Platte's Basin Implementation Plan or the State Water Plan, how would they do that? What would be the next step for somebody from an interest group or just a citizen to go forward?
Thanks, Reagan. There's several avenues. As I mentioned, the Basin Implementation Plan is being developed by contractors that have been hired by your South Platte Basin Roundtable. And they're going to be having a series of outreach meetings. The Basin Roundtable itself meets once a month. They're meeting out at Sterling actually next Tuesday night or late afternoon. And they will be publishing their outreach meetings. Beyond that, there is the website that you can go to, and there are forms available there for individual or organizational type of comments. There's also the framework, kind of a draft framework of what the Water Conservation Board is looking at to put together the water plan. And so you can look at each of those components and you can see what's been proposed so far, and they keep updating it as people add documents and add information to it. But go there, and that's a way an individual or a group that doesn't participate in the roundtable process can. But I really like the idea of the roundtable process, because the 9 roundtables in Colorado, what they come up with will be the basic building blocks and a big part of the water plan draft as it's put together.
And John, what about the environmental needs and ecosystem services, et cetera? How are those being considered?
You know, as we've been discussing this project with the Interbasin Compact Committee and the Water Conservation Board and the roundtables, the non-consumptive uses and the environmental importance of water to Colorado has been a main component of that. And we have subcommittees that have been working on that. As you look at the values that were put into the executive order, we talk about vibrant cities, productive agriculture, robust recreation, and an environment that is protected through the appropriate consideration if we do any changes in water. And so we've had committees within the IBCC and in each of the roundtables that have dealt with the non-consumptive and environmental aspects of that. Bob Streeter, you're somewhere around here. You've been very active in that, I know, in the South Platte Roundtable. I don't know if you'd want to mention any more about that or not. I'll put Bob on the spot.
Thanks, John. The Non-Consumptive Needs Committee is joined together with the Metro Roundtable, the Metro and the South Platte working together, and we are developing the non-consumptive needs input. And make a long story short, we've come up with attributes that are important, recreational and environmental attributes, such as an endangered species or flat water boating areas, important burning areas. Those attributes then have been mapped. There have to be data behind them. Developing a map that shows where the most important recreation and environmental focus areas are in the South Platte Basin. And then as we move forward, as there are projects that can be done to improve those values, either through new projects or through existing projects where some cooperation can be done between water users, where the environmental attributes can be benefited. That's what we're trying to push for in the final water plan. Opportunities for input, people can contact me or the website, as you said, or try to attend some of these South Platte Roundtable meetings. We have, in addition to the Roundtable meetings each month, we have about every 2 weeks, the Non-Consumptive Needs Committee gets together. It's open to anybody that would like to come and see where we are on it and have input. So it's a wide open process. We beg people to get involved. So we would like to have you do so. Contact me, contact John. There's other members of the Roundtable that are here. If you'd raise your hand, I think.
How about stand up even, members of the Roundtable?
Mark is the chair of the Metro Roundtable. Jeff Boring is on the South Platte Roundtable, Non-Consumptive Needs.
Doug Rebotham back here. I'd like to say something.
Doug Rebotham is on the South Platte Roundtable and on our non-consumptive needs, so contact any one of us.
I'd like to point out, too, that the South Platte Basin Roundtable, along with the other roundtables, were established, 5-7 years ago? The time flies, but many groups and individuals have said to me that they feel a little bit as if they don't have a place there. And my belief is that if you want to have something to do with that roundtable, just go and be there and get involved. And I believe that the roundtable is more open now for hearing from others than ever before. Sean Cronin, who was on our Poudre Rivers Runs Through It the first year, is the chair now of the South Platte Basin Roundtable. So I'd encourage you to find out about that. Go to some of the meetings, find out what's going on.
Kevin Gerdick, City of Fort Collins Utilities. I just want to alert the audience to some outstanding triple helix work going on in northern Colorado with Colorado State University. The new Clean Center be focused on nutrient removal, understanding the fate and transport of nitrogen and phosphorus. Just launched last month, over $2 million grant, some outstanding faculty on that. And together with all of us in this room, entities, the university, and other researchers, we're going to have a great mechanism to leverage and propel our fate and understanding of phosphorus and nitrogen from snow melt all the way to the Platte. So I'm really fired up about that, and many of you in this room hopefully are as well. There's other components to that, such as the wind project, and that's an innovative process. Again, a triple helix working with our great analytical wing in Fort Collins. We've got some great manufacturers in this area to have online monitoring and direct feedback. So now we're going to be able to ascertain what's happening in all these 9 points throughout the Cashel-Poudre Basin. So I can't tell you how excited I am. There's some great work, and I had to throw that in, Reagan and Mary Lou, just from the standpoint of some awesome work moving ahead, all with our great Colorado State University and others in the area.
Wow, I can feel that excitement, Kevin. Thank you.
My name is Julie Ash, and I'm with Walsh Environmental and also the Colorado Riparian Association. And I just wanted to hit one more time on a really important point I heard throughout the day, and Ashley just brought it up, and Tracy just brought it up, and it's the fact that we always have to think about site-specific. There's never going to be one solution to all of our problems, and the comment about how we can get some really important riparian habitat out farther away from our main stem, and there are going to be places where that is really important, and we should never forget to look into it. And then there are going to unfortunately be some cases where that would be to the unacceptable detriment of the main stem habitat. And so again, just knowing that one answer is never going to apply, and get all the collaboration and the good brain power together to think of all the options. It's really important. Thank you.
Great point. Brad, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to tell you that I started kicking around in your rivers about 45 years ago. I just thought of that. My gosh, where did the time go? But I wanted to leave y'all with one thought when you go home today, and that is disasters are opportunity. And Lord knows you people have had an awful lot of disasters recently, but they are the opportunity to do all kinds of things. Even working with FEPA and trying to show FEMA that yes, this is what we can do, this is what would cost to replace it as is, but we, the citizens, are willing to put up the extra money to make this a super project. They at FEMA really are people just like us. They got a job to do, but they will listen. I can tell you that, and I'd be happy to help you do that. But I want you to go home and I want you to think of, in your separate disciplines and your collective disciplines, if you would please just say to yourself, say it now in your head, you know that little voice? Just say, disasters are opportunity. And yes, go ahead and have those plans in your desk drawer so that when something happens, you can pull out a beautiful bridge. You can pull out a beautiful dam. You can pull out a little sewer that needs to be taken care of, okay? My name is Della, and it's been a pleasure to be here with you today.
Very inspiring. Thank you.
I have a question to bring back to one of the first topics we had, and that's agriculture. From an environmental perspective, agriculture is very important to fish and wildlife habitat throughout the South Platte Basin. And if we were to lose irrigated agriculture, the habitat changes, and we would lose a lot of wildlife opportunities. So my question, I guess, is with increased growth, and several people mentioned the population in the Colorado, and particularly along the Front Range and in the Poudre Basin, is going to double in the next 25, 30, 35 years. There's probably not a lot of new water to develop in this basin. There's a divide between the east and the west as to whether we would ever be able to develop more water. John, I think we're still not sure how much water is available under compacts. So what is the future of irrigated agriculture in the Poudre Basin? And I don't have the answer to that, but I'd certainly like to see if anyone else has any comments about that. Because as growth occurs, water's coming off agriculture and going to the municipalities, even with conservation. So that's my question. What's agriculture going to look like as we go 20, 30, 40 years down the road here?
It's a great question. So the question is, what's ag going to look like? George or anybody, you want to take a whack at it?
I think if commodity prices stay good and farmers are making a living, and also I think if we come up with some alternative sources of income for people who decide not to sell their water and to hold on to it, i.e. water sharing during drought recovery, and that sort of thing, that there is hope. And I think that the local food movement, the Be Local, know where your food comes from, reduce your carbon footprint, things that are going on out there will help. I still worry because one of the things I'd like to plant is that as long as developers are required to turn in ag water for every development proposal, instead of in cash in lieu, it seems to me that we ought to at least try to do some of these innovative and collaborative things, including the nutrient loading, shared storage, dredging, whatever. We need to realize that the by and dry, the continual movement of water off the ag landscape, is at this point sort of an automatic event anytime a developer decides to build. And we need to come up with some, I don't know whether it's a pilot moratorium or more use of cash in lieu of those water shares being transferred. But it occurred to me the other day that unless we think boldly, I also worry, like you, Bob, about long-term future. I remain optimistic, but we've got to have people making a living, and we've got to give them some alternate sources of income for the shares, water shares they hold on to.
So just to underscore the point that George made, John Stolp and I were over in Greeley yesterday talking to a group of farmers and talking about how to keep water on the farm, Bob, and their answer was, keep farming profitable, we want to farm. You know, will that really persist in the face of high water prices? You know, can they resist that pressure? we'll see. This place is growing. There's just no doubt about it. It's growing over ag land. Brad, go ahead. Or Bill.
Well, I don't know if I'm prepared to do this. I love that old saying that the difficulty with prognostication is predicting the future. And I think that's what you're asking us to do. What I see is going to be happening is as we grow in population, and we will, there's sort of that three-legged stool that we're going to have to look at to provide for increased municipal use, and it'll be storage, even more conservation, and it's going to be, I think, continued obtaining in some fashion of water from irrigated agriculture. Right now, what's in vogue is interruptible supply plans, fallowing, and all of that kind of stuff, which has the merit of, if it, when this is implemented, of allowing the farmers to stay on the land and the feed stores and the implement dealers maybe to stay in business. It's better for the community. But there's no getting around the fact that with all of these approaches, even though it's not buy and dry, we're still going to see a drop in agricultural production. And I wouldn't be at all surprised to see a drift of irrigated agriculture out further to the east in Colorado and maybe even moving to other states. There's going to be an impact. I don't think this is the forum to talk about the Northern Integrated Supply Project. But really the point of that, even though when you look at it at first blush, it seems to be providing water for municipal growth, its real point is to give the municipal water providers an alternate source of water so they don't have to go out and continue to raid irrigated agriculture. The final thing I will say is this: I think it makes a lot of difference what's going on in ag. If ag is profitable, you're going to be, you'll see it doing a lot better. When Thornton came up to this area in the 80s to acquire their 100 and so farms, a lot of farmers were in a world of hurt. Things were not good financially for them, and so there was an incentive to sell. So my hope is we could keep a thriving, productive agriculture going here, but I do think realistically we're going to see some drop in it.
I'd like to point out that this issue about growth and providing water for growth and what are we going to do about it, Lee Rosaklis brought it up this morning. There is dialogue going on in the state about how to bring together those who are responsible for providing water with those who are responsible for land use planning, and trying to get those two groups of people together to talk and begin figuring out how can we reduce the water footprint of the development that we have. So there's work going on in that direction too.
I just wanted to address Bill's comment, and I wondered if NISP would come up during the forum today. My name's Mark Easter. I'm chair of the board of Save the Poudre, and our organization is formed out of concerns about the prospect of water development on the Poudre River. And I just wanted to address, and it's kind of ironic that we're ending on this note here, I think, and I'd be happy to share the argument, or continue the argument with somebody else here over a beer, but I just want to address this issue that NISP would help agriculture. And we've tried to make the point for over a decade now that that's not the case. We've looked at this from 6 ways to Sunday, and there's sort of two key issues I want to point out. The first is that there's over 30,000 acre-feet of water rights on the Poudre River that are junior to NISP, that are being executed right now, that would go away if NISP is built. So that's number one. Number two, I really take exception with the point that NISP would create an alternative supply on the basis of that point. If you've got 30,000 acre-feet of water going away that's currently being used by ag, I really don't think we're talking realistically about an alternative supply scenario. We're just robbing from Peter to pay Paul.
So
and
Mark,
that's it.
Yeah, thank you, and you got the last word, and I appreciate how civil that was. And I think it shows that, we got a lot going on in this basin. We got growth coming. We don't have enough water. There are diversity of opinions and values, and that's what makes this challenging. But the great thing is really the heart for the people that are here and that love this basin and love this place and want to make it a great place. And let's continue this dialogue. There's a lot yet to be said. And, you know, this was our first Poudre River Forum. I'm hoping that we can do this at least every year. I think we need to. You know, somebody said today, and I was really astounded at this point, there's 300,000 people using this river. There's less than 300 of us in the room, right? So there's, what, 299,700 other people out there that aren't part of this conversation. And what it says to me is we've got a lot of work to do. The educational part of this is huge. We've got to keep talking. As I listened today, I heard a lot of experts in this room, and I was wondering, you know, is there anybody in this room that doesn't know anything about water? And what does it sound like when you don't? Does it sound like a lot of experts? Or is it clear to you? But I think we have work to do in this community. We've got a great river. We've got a great watershed. We see growth coming. There's not enough water. We're going to have to work this out. And let's work it out as a community. Let's find that place where our values can come together. We can have a working river. We can make it as healthy as possible. We can continue to have this. It's just a great place to live and thrive and play, and as Jen said, have fun as well. And so the folks I want to thank, Mary Lou and her crew, who organized this and who were behind the scenes. Let's give them a hand, please. I want to thank the Poudre Runs Through It steering committee and the whole group. You all did a great job. Thank you. Our sponsors, hey, the beer, the food, all great. Thank you all that helped sponsor this. Thank you guys who did the booths. I think there was a lot to be seen here. I see new ideas. I mean, hey, we're going to do a museum in the waterworks, and we're going to do a whitewater trail, and, you know, a canoe trail and a whitewater park. And hey, I see ideas all over the place and in this room, and it excites me, and I think it's a great thing. And then last, I want to thank you all, the audience and the people who gave your Saturday to this community and this river. You guys are awesome. Great dialogue. Hey, one more time, let's thank the speakers also and all that were involved in putting this together. Thank you guys. Great job.